Ambassador Chen Wei stood before the Galactic Council, his hands clasped behind his back as he listened to the final verdict. The massive chamber buzzed with the sounds of 1,000 different species, their voices mixing into a symphony of clicks, whistles, and electronic translations. Above him, the great dome displayed the star maps of the galaxy, with Earth's position now marked in ominous red. "The human species," announced Councillor Vextai, his crystalline form shimmering with each word, "has been found guilty of excessive aggression, unpredictable behavior, and dangerous expansion patterns. The Council has voted." Chen's translator earpiece crackled as it converted the alien speech. Around the circular chamber, representatives from over 300 species sat in their designated sections. The Altherans, with their flowing tentacles. The mechanical Zorith Collective. The gaseous Nebulans in their containment suits. All had cast their votes. By a margin of 273 to 27, Vextai continued. "Earth and all human colonies are hereby expelled from galactic civilization. All trade agreements are terminated. All technological sharing is ceased. All diplomatic relations are severed." The chamber fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Chen could feel thousands of eyes, sensors, and other alien sensory organs focused on him, waiting for his reaction. They expected rage, they expected pleading, they expected the kind of emotional outburst that had gotten humanity into this situation in the first place. Instead, Chen smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but in that moment of absolute silence, it carried across the entire chamber. The Galactic News Network cameras zoomed in on his face, broadcasting that simple expression to billions of beings across the galaxy. "Ambassador Chen," Vextai said, his crystalline structure flickering with what might have been confusion. "Do you understand the gravity of this decision? Your species is being cut off from galactic civilization. No trade, no technology, no contact. You will be alone." Chen's smile widened just a fraction. "I understand perfectly, Counselor, and I accept the Council's decision on behalf of Earth and all human colonies." A ripple of confusion passed through the assembly. The Vorthak representative, a large insectoid creature, clicked his mandibles rapidly. "You accept? Just like that?" "Yes," Chen replied, his voice calm and steady. "We respect the Council's authority in this matter." The confusion was spreading. This wasn't how exile proceedings usually went. Most species either broke down in desperate pleas or erupted in furious protests. The Kelthani had spent 3 days weeping when they were exiled for industrial espionage. The Druleks had threatened to destroy half the galaxy before being forcibly removed. But the humans? They were smiling. Councillor Vextai attempted to regain control. "Let the record show that as of Galactic Standard Date, 4847.3, all human territories are beyond the protection and benefits of the Galactic Council. Any attempt to contact or trade with human space will result in similar sanctions." "Understood," Chen nodded. "We'll begin the withdrawal process immediately." In the observation galleries, journalists and diplomats from across the galaxy whispered among themselves. The human reaction was unprecedented. Ambassador Ziltara of the hegemony leaned toward her aide, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "Are they planning something? This calmness is unsettling." Down on the chamber floor, Chen continued to address the council with the same serene expression. "If there are no other matters to discuss, I'll take my leave. We have a lot of work ahead of us." Vex's tie's crystalline form pulsed with uncertainty. "Work? Ambassador, perhaps you don't understand. Your species is being cast out. You will have no access to galactic technology, no trading partners, no allies. You will be completely isolated." Chen paused at the entrance to the human delegation booth, turning back one last time. That smile was still there. And now there was something else in his eyes. Something that made several nearby species unconsciously step back. "Counselor," Chen said softly, "we've been isolated before. We learned to make fire in caves. We built boats to cross oceans we'd never seen. We reached for the stars from a single small world." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Being alone has never stopped us before. Why would it stop us now? The chamber erupted in nervous chatter as Chen walked away, his security detail falling in behind him. The humans' calm acceptance of exile was already becoming the biggest news story in galactic history. In her private quarters aboard the Hegemony flagship, Ambassador Ziltara reviewed the footage again. There was something about that human smile that bothered her. She had studied human behavior for decades, ever since first contact 50 years ago. Humans smiled when they were happy, yes, but they also smiled when they were planning something. The smile during the trial hadn't looked like happiness. 3 days later, the last human diplomatic vessels departed from Council space. The exodus was orderly, efficient, and strangely cheerful. Human crews waved goodbye to dock workers and maintenance staff as if they were leaving for vacation rather than permanent exile. On the bridge of the departing Earth ship Times, Determination *, Captain Sarah Rodriguez watched the massive Council station shrink in the view screen. Her first officer, Commander Park, stood beside her. "Orders." "Captain?" Park asked. "Set course for Earth," Rodriguez replied, "and send a message to all human colonies. Phase 1 is complete." Park nodded, then paused. "Ma'am, what exactly is Phase 1? Rodriguez's smile was identical to the one Chen had worn in the Council chamber. "Getting them to let us go willingly, Commander. Now the real work begins." Back in Council space, the first reports were already coming in. Human trade ships had simply vanished. Not fled, not hidden, but vanished from sensors entirely. Human colonies that had been bustling with activity just days before now showed no energy signatures. It was as if the entire human species had simply stepped off the galactic stage. Councillor Vextai studied the reports in his private office, his crystalline form shifting through colors that indicated deep thought. The behavior was unprecedented. Exiled species usually spent years trying to find ways back into galactic society. They sent envoys, they begged, they offered tribute. But the humans? They had thanked the Council for the exile and disappeared. 3 months passed. The galaxy settled into its new normal without humans. Trade routes were redistributed. Colonies that had dealt with human businesses found new partners. And slowly, the name human began fading from daily conversation, except for one thing: the smiles. Whenever anyone mentioned the exile, they remembered Ambassador Chen's smile. It haunted diplomatic discussions and appeared in news reports. Psychologists from a dozen species tried to analyze what it meant, but they all reached the same conclusion. They didn't understand humans well enough to interpret it. The Altherans, always paranoid, began increasing their border patrols. The Kelthani, who had never forgotten their own exile, started building additional defense fleets. Even the mighty Zorith Collective, with their planet-sized computational matrices, began running probability calculations on what the humans might be planning. All their calculations returned the same result: insufficient data. Dr. Keth Moore, the galaxy's leading expert on human psychology, published a paper titled The Exile Smile, an analysis of human behavioral patterns under extreme stress. The paper concluded that the smile was likely a coping mechanism, a way for the human psyche to deal with the trauma of rejection. But even Dr. Keth Moore felt uneasy about his own conclusions. Meanwhile, in the depths of space far beyond Council territory, something was happening. Ships appeared and disappeared in uninhabited systems. Energy signatures flared briefly before vanishing. Construction projects began and were completed in impossible timeframes. The few long-range sensors that caught glimpses of this activity recorded things that didn't make sense. Ships moving faster than any known technology should allow. Energy patterns that defied known physics. Construction techniques that seemed to bend space itself. But the reports were dismissed. After all, the humans had been exiled. They had no access to advanced technology. Whatever was happening in the deep dark between stars, it couldn't be related to the primitive species that had just been cast out of civilization. Could it? As the first year of exile drew to a close, strange stories began circulating among the border worlds. Traders spoke of ghost ships that appeared on sensors for moments before vanishing. Mining operations reported equipment that repaired itself overnight. Explorers found ancient ruins that seemed somehow refreshed. The stories were investigated, of course. But whenever Council ships arrived to check, they found nothing unusual. Just empty space, normal operations, and old ruins that looked exactly as they should. But the stories kept coming, and somewhere in the depths of space, on a world that existed in no star charts and appeared on no sensors, Ambassador Chen Wei stood before a massive holographic display. The display showed the galaxy, with thousands of colored dots representing the locations of ongoing human operations. Chen was still smiling. "How long until we're ready?" asked the woman standing beside him. Admiral Lisa Park had been promoted from her old position as commander and now oversaw operations that spanned half the galaxy. "Another 6 months for full deployment," Chen replied. "The isolation protocols are working perfectly. They can't see us, they can't track us, and they can't even imagine what we're actually doing." Park nodded, studying the display. "Think they suspect anything?" Chen's smile took on a different quality. Not the calm acceptance he had shown the Council, but something far more dangerous. "Oh, they suspect. But they're asking the wrong questions." "What do you mean?" "They're wondering what we're planning to do to them," Chen explained. "They're not wondering what we've already done." The display shifted, showing energy readings from across the galaxy. To most observers, the readings would look like normal background radiation. But to someone who knew what to look for, they told a very different story. "The network is almost complete," Chen continued. "Every dead system, every asteroid field, every patch of empty space they thought was worthless. We've been busy." Sen, Park studied the readings with growing amazement. "How long have we been planning this?" "Since first contact," Chen replied. "Did you really think we'd make it this far without learning to plan ahead? We knew this day would come. The galaxy fears us because we're different, because we don't fit their neat little categories. So we prepared for the day they'd try to get rid of us." On the display, a new indicator appeared, a human ship returning from deep space with a cargo that didn't exist on any official manifest. "And now?" Park asked. Chen's smile became something that would have terrified the Galactic Council if they could have seen it. "Now we wait just a little longer. Let them get comfortable with the idea that we're gone. Let them convince themselves they're safe." He turned to face Park directly. "Because when we come back, we're going to show them exactly what happens when you exile a species that has spent 50,000 years turning impossible situations into advantages." The display updated again, showing construction progress on projects whose very existence would have shattered the Council's understanding of what was possible. And in the silence of that hidden world, surrounded by technology that shouldn't exist and plans that defied imagination, humanity continued to smile. They had been exiled from the galaxy, but the galaxy had no idea what it had just set free. 18 months had passed since the exile, and the galaxy had grown comfortable with the absence of humans. Trade flowed smoothly along redistricted routes. Diplomatic relations had stabilized without the unpredictable human element, and the major powers had settled into a new equilibrium. The Galactic Council's daily reports no longer mentioned humanity at all, but Dr. Kethmore couldn't shake his unease. The Altiran researcher sat in his laboratory aboard the research station Times Enlightenment *, surrounded by data streams and analysis reports. For over a year, he had been studying the phenomenon of the exile smile, that strange expression Ambassador Chen had worn during the proceedings. What had started as academic curiosity had become an obsession. "Computer, display all recorded instances of human psychological responses to crisis situations," he commanded. The holographic display filled with thousands of data points collected over 50 years of contact with humanity. Battle recordings, diplomatic negotiations, natural disasters, first contact scenarios. Every significant interaction between humans and galactic civilization had been documented and analyzed. Kethmore's 4 eyes tracked across the data, his tentacles twitching with nervous energy. There was a pattern here, something that had been missed by every analyst who had studied these interactions. Humans didn't just adapt to crisis situations, they seemed to thrive in them. Computer. Isolate instances where humans faced overwhelming odds or impossible situations. The display narrowed to several hundred incidents. In each case, human responses followed a similar pattern. Initial assessment, rapid adaptation, unconventional solution, implementation, and ultimately, success, despite seemingly impossible circumstances. By the void, Kethmore whispered in his native tongue. They don't see exile as punishment. They see it as opportunity. His revelation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Hegemony Intelligence Division. Ambassador Ziltara's image materialized in his lab, her 4 eyes blinking in rapid sequence. A sign of extreme agitation. Dr. Kethmore, we need to talk. Privately. 20 minutes later, Kethmore found himself in a secure conference room with representatives from the 3 major galactic powers. Besides Ziltara, there was General Thoktar from the Dominion Military Council and Collective Node Prime 7 from the Zorith Confederation. What I'm about to share, Ziltara began, is classified at the highest levels. 6 months ago, we began detecting anomalous readings from sectors that were previously human territory. The holographic display showed a star map with scattered red indicators. At first, we thought it was just residual energy from abandoned human colonies. But the patterns don't match any known technology. General Thoktar, his massive form dominating one side of the conference table, growled in his rumbling voice. 3 of our deep space patrols have gone missing in the last month, all in regions near former human space. No distress calls, no wreckage, no trace. Collective Node Prime 7's mechanical form whirred as it processed data. Probability analysis indicates 97.3% chance of human involvement. However, this contradicts all known human technological capabilities. Kethmore felt his worst fears crystallizing. Show me the energy signatures. The display shifted to show wavelength analyses and power readings. What Kethmore saw defied explanation. The energy patterns were unlike anything in the galactic database, but there were subtle harmonics that seemed almost familiar. These readings, he said slowly, they're not just unknown technology. They're impossible technology. The power requirements alone would need the output of a small star. Ziltara's expression grew grim. That's what concerns us. Either the humans have discovered something revolutionary, or they've made contact with something we don't understand. In the depths of space, far beyond the reach of galactic sensors, humanity's greatest secret was revealed in a massive underground complex carved into a rogue planet. The facility stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction, its corridors bustling with activity that would have shattered every assumption the galaxy held about human capabilities. Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to the ambassador, despite the shared surname, stood before a massive viewing window that looked out onto humanity's crown achievement. Floating in the artificial chamber beyond was a structure that seemed to bend light around itself, its surface shifting between states of matter in ways that defied physics. Status report, she requested from her AI assistant. All 14 facilities are now operational. The AI responded in a voice that carried harmonics no galactic translator could have parsed. Integration with the deep network is complete. We are ready to begin. Phase 2. Sarah nodded, watching as streams of data flowed through conduits made of crystallized space-time. Humanity's exile had been a blessing in ways the Galactic Council could never imagine. Free from observation and interference, they had been able to complete research that had begun long before first contact. The viewing chamber's doors opened, and Admiral Park entered, followed by a figure that would have shocked any galactic observer. A human, whose eyes held depths that seemed to contain stars. Dr. Chen, Park said, I'd like you to meet Captain Torres. She's just returned from the Andromeda expedition. Captain Rosa Torres stepped forward, and space itself seemed to ripple slightly around her. Dr. Chen. The preliminary surveys are complete. Andromeda is definitely the source of the signals we've been tracking. Sarah's eyes widened. You made contact? Torres's smile carried the same quality as Ambassador Chen's. calm confidence backed by knowledge that others couldn't fathom. In a manner of speaking, it turns out humanity isn't as unique as we thought. We're just early. The revelation hung in the air like a thunderclap. For 50 years, galactic civilization had operated under the assumption that the member species represented the pinnacle of evolution and technology in the universe. The discovery of even older, more advanced civilizations would shatter that worldview. How much older? Sarah asked. About 2 million years, Torres replied casually. Meanwhile, in a hidden facility on the edge of human space, Ambassador Chen stood before a gathering of humanity's most brilliant minds. Scientists, engineers, philosophers, and military leaders. All working toward a goal that had taken shape over decades of careful planning. Ladies and gentlemen, Chen began. 18 months ago, the galaxy chose to exile us. They saw our rapid expansion, our unconventional approaches, our refusal to fit into their neat categories, and they decided we were too dangerous to remain part of their civilization. A murmur of agreement passed through the assembled crowd. They were right. Chen continued with that same unsettling smile. We are dangerous. But not in the way they think. The massive display behind him activated, showing a three-dimensional map of the entire local group of galaxies. Dots of light indicated human positions. Not just in the Milky Way, but scattered across multiple galaxies. While they've spent the last 50 years trying to categorize us, we've been exploring. While they've been following trade routes established millions of years ago, we've been finding new paths through space that they never imagined existed. While they've been content with the technology they inherited from their predecessors, we've been discovering what lies beyond. Dr. Maria Santos, humanity's chief physicist, stood to address the assembly. The quantum tunneling experiments have been successful. We can now move ships instantaneously across galactic distances without using the established hyperspace lanes. The galaxy's entire understanding of faster-than-light travel is obsolete. Another scientist, Dr. James Wright, added his report. The consciousness transfer protocols are operational. Death as a permanent state is now optional for human beings. We can back up, transfer, and restore human consciousness at will. The revelations continued. Technologies that would seem like magic to galactic civilization were presented as routine achievements. Artificial gravity that didn't require massive generators, matter converters that could transform elements at the atomic level, energy sources that drew power from the quantum vacuum itself. Chen listened to each report with growing satisfaction. The architects have been generous teachers, he said when the technical briefings concluded. But more than that, they've been waiting for a species with the right qualities. Which qualities? Asked General Harrison, commander of Earth's Defense Forces. Adaptability, Chen replied. Creativity. The willingness to challenge established assumptions. And most importantly, the ability to smile in the face of the impossible. Back in galactic space, the mysterious disappearances were accelerating. Entire trade convoys vanished without trace. Deep space monitoring stations went dark. Even heavily armed military patrols simply ceased to exist, leaving behind no evidence of their fate. The Galactic Council convened emergency sessions. But their investigations yielded nothing. No wreckage, no energy signatures, no survivors. It was as if ships were simply being erased from existence. Dr. Keth Moore presented his analysis to an increasingly desperate council leadership. The pattern suggests surgical precision, he reported. Whatever is responsible has intimate knowledge of galactic ship movements and technology. But more disturbing is what's not happening. Counselor Vextai's crystalline form pulsed with anxiety. Explain. No communications, no demands, no evidence of violence. Traditional hostile actions would leave traces. Energy discharge, debris, distress signals. This is something else entirely. Ships aren't being destroyed. They're being collected. Collected. The word hung in the chamber like a death sentence. Collected by whom? Vextai demanded. Keth Moore's tentacles writhed with barely controlled fear. I believe we made a terrible mistake 18 months ago. We didn't exile humanity from the galaxy. We freed them from our oversight. In the hidden depths of the architect facility, Captain Torres stood before a being that defied description. The architect's form shifted constantly, sometimes appearing as geometric patterns of pure energy, sometimes as a vaguely humanoid shape made of living starlight. Your species shows remarkable progress. The architect communicated through methods that bypassed sound entirely, speaking directly to Torres's consciousness. 50 years from first contact to exile. Most species require millennia to reach this point. Torres found herself able to respond through the same consciousness-to-consciousness link. We've had good motivation. Being told we don't belong tends to bring out our stubborn streak. The architect's form rippled with what might have been amusement. Yes. We observed your exile proceedings. Your ambassador's response was appropriate. The galaxy's younger species fear what they don't understand. They mistake novelty for threat. And you don't? We have observed the rise and fall of thousands of civilizations across millions of years, the architect replied. We know the difference between a species that destroys and one that transforms. Humanity has the potential to be gardeners of reality itself. Torres felt a chill of anticipation. What do you mean? The space around them shifted, and suddenly they were floating in a void filled with countless stars. But these weren't ordinary stars. They pulsed with artificial rhythms, their light carrying patterns of information that spoke of vast intelligence and purpose. Every point of light you see represents a civilization that we have guided to transcendence, the architect explained. Some took millions of years to reach readiness. Others, like the Vorthaki of the Magellanic Clouds, required only thousands. But humanity, the starfield shifted, showing the Milky Way galaxy. Streams of energy were flowing between star systems in patterns that looked almost like a vast neural network. Humanity may be ready within decades, the architect continued. Your exile was not punishment. It was graduation. Back on Earth, in a bunker deep beneath the Swiss Alps, humanity's leaders gathered for the final phase of their response to exile. The room was filled with people whose very presence would have terrified the Galactic Council. Humans whose eyes held depths that spoke of experiences beyond normal space and time. Ambassador Chen stood at the center of the assembly, but he was no longer quite the same person who had faced the Council 18 months earlier. His smile now carried the weight of cosmic knowledge, and when he spoke, reality itself seemed to listen. Phase 3 begins tomorrow, he announced. The galaxy has had time to realize what they've lost. Now it's time to show them what they've gained. Admiral Park, whose own presence seemed to bend light in subtle ways, activated the final display. It showed the Milky Way galaxy, but overlaid with a network of human facilities that spanned from one spiral arm to another. Hidden bases, research stations, and defensive installations formed a web that encompassed territory the exiled humans technically shouldn't even have been able to reach. All ships report ready, Park announced. We can be at the galactic core within 6 hours. Chen nodded. And our guests? Another figure stepped forward, one whose appearance would have shattered the galaxy's understanding of what was possible. Captain Torres looked human, but the space around her moved with her thoughts. And when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that existed outside normal dimensions. The architects are ready to make formal contact, Torres reported. They've been waiting 2 million years for the right moment. Humanity's exile was the signal they needed. Chen's smile reached its full glory. No longer just confident, but radiant with purpose that spanned galaxies. Then let's go home. It's time to show the galaxy what exile really taught us. As humanity prepared for its return, the galaxy continued its slide toward chaos. Trade had collapsed as more ships disappeared. Governments were falling as panic spread. The 3 major powers were mobilizing their fleets for wars against enemies they couldn't even identify. None of them realized that their exiled problem had spent 18 months becoming their impossible solution. The return of humanity would change everything. But first, they had to survive the shock of learning just how small their galaxy really was. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in recorded history. representatives from over 400 species packed into chambers designed for half that number. Emergency broadcasts carried the proceedings to every corner of galactic civilization, as leaders struggled to comprehend the crisis engulfing their society. Counselor Vex Tai's crystalline form had lost its usual brilliant clarity, dimmed by stress and fear. In the past month, we have lost over 12,000 ships, he announced to the silent assembly. Entire sectors have gone dark. Trade has collapsed. 3 minor governments have fallen to panic. The massive holographic display showed the galaxy map, now dotted with red zones where ships had vanished without explanation. The pattern was spreading like an infection, consuming trade routes and communication networks. The hegemony has lost contact with 14 colony worlds, reported Ambassador Ziltara, her 4 eyes darting nervously. Energy signatures suggest the colonies still exist, but they no longer respond to any communications. General Thoktar of the Dominion slammed a massive fist on his podium. This is war. Some enemy force is systematically destroying galactic civilization, and we waste time talking instead of fighting. Fighting whom? Demanded the representative from the Kelthani Federation. We can't even find evidence of an enemy. Ships vanish from secure hyperspace lanes. Colonies go silent with no signs of struggle. How do you fight ghosts? The debate continued for hours, species blaming each other, theories growing more desperate, fear spreading like wildfire through the assembly. None of them noticed the subtle change in the chamber's energy patterns. None of them saw the way light began to bend differently near the main entrance. None of them were prepared when reality simply stepped aside. The great doors of the council chamber, massive constructs of reinforced neutronium that could withstand stellar bombardment, didn't open. They weren't destroyed or bypassed. They simply became irrelevant as space folded around them, creating an entrance where none had existed before. Ambassador Chen Wei walked through the impossible doorway as if it were the most natural thing in the universe. He looked exactly as he had 18 months earlier. Calm, composed, and wearing that same small smile. Behind him came a procession that defied every law of physics the galaxy understood. Captain Torres materialized next, but calling her human was no longer accurate. She moved through dimensions that existed parallel to normal space, her form shifting between states of matter and energy. Admiral Park followed, surrounded by a field that made sensors throughout the chamber report impossible readings. But it was the figures behind them that made the entire assembly fall into stunned silence. The architects had come. They appeared as geometric impossibilities, beings of pure thought given form through technologies that predated galactic civilization by millions of years. Their presence alone rewrote local physics, making the air itself hum with power that could reshape stars. Chen stepped to the center of the chamber, that familiar smile now radiant with cosmic awareness. "Honorable counselors," he said, his voice somehow reaching every ear despite speaking at normal volume. "We've come home." The chamber erupted in chaos. Emergency alarms blared. Security forces moved to surround the impossible visitors, and dozens of species shouted questions in languages that translation systems struggled to parse. But none of their weapons would function. Their security fields had become decorative, and their shouts fell silent as Chen raised one hand. "Please," he said gently. "We have much to discuss, and very little time." Counselor Vex Tai's form flickered between colors that indicated complete psychological breakdown. "You? How did you?" "The security systems are based on technology that assumes matter and energy behave according to rules established by younger civilizations," Chen explained patiently. "We've learned better ways." Dr. Keth Moore, watching from the observation gallery, felt every theory he'd ever held about reality crumble into dust. The energy readings from the human delegation weren't just impossible. They suggested these beings operated on principles that existed outside the universe as he understood it. "The ships," whispered Ambassador Ziltara. "The missing colonies. That was you." Chen's smile took on a quality that managed to be both apologetic and terrifying. "We've been collecting samples of galactic civilization," he admitted. "Your people are unharmed, I assure you." But we needed to understand what we were working with. Working with for what? Vextai demanded. One of the architects stepped forward, its form shifting through geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. When it spoke, the words bypassed sound entirely, appearing directly in the consciousness of every being in the chamber. For the great integration, it said. Your galaxy has reached the threshold. The choice must be made. The concept of the great integration flooded into their minds, not as words or images, but as direct understanding. It was a process that every galaxy eventually faced, a transformation that elevated all civilizations simultaneously to a higher plane of existence. But it required a catalyst species, one capable of bridging the gap between what was and what could be. We have guided thousands of species through this transition across millions of years, the architect continued. But none have shown the adaptability and resilience of humanity. None have been ready so quickly. General Thoktar's warrior instincts finally overcame his shock. Ready for what? What are you asking us to do? Captain Torres answered, her voice carrying harmonics that existed in dimensions beyond normal space. Evolve, she said, simply. Move beyond the limitations of single-planet thinking, beyond the fear of change that keeps civilizations trapped in cycles of growth and stagnation. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't conquest or destruction. It was an offer of transcendence that challenged every assumption about the nature of existence itself. The missing ships and colonies, Chen explained, are safe in spaces we've created outside normal reality. Your people are experiencing possibilities they never imagined. Some have chosen to stay and explore these new realms. Others have asked to return home with knowledge that will transform their societies. Admiral Park gestured, and the chamber's holographic display shifted to show views that shouldn't have been possible. The missing ships floating in spaces that existed between dimensions, their crews working alongside beings of pure energy, colonies thriving in environments where the laws of physics had been gently rewritten to allow impossible abundance. Choice, Chen emphasized. That's what humanity learned during our exile. The galaxy exiled us because you feared our refusal to accept limitations. But limitations are just suggestions. Reality is far more flexible than any of you realized. Counselor Vextai's form stabilized slightly as he grasped for some framework to understand what he was experiencing. You're offering to change the laws of physics? We're offering to show you that the laws you think are absolute were written by younger civilizations trying to understand forces beyond their comprehension, Torres replied. The architects taught us to read the original manual. Ah. The debate that followed stretched across hours and tested the limits of language itself. Species that had spent millennia accepting the fundamental constants of reality found themselves confronted with evidence that those constants were merely local customs. Representatives struggled to comprehend technologies that treated space and time as malleable resources rather than absolute constraints. The Kelthani representative, still remembering their own exile centuries earlier, asked the question that haunted them all. What happens to species that refuse, that choose to remain normal? The architect's response carried the weight of cosmic experience. Nothing happens to them, it said. They continue as before, within spaces we maintain for those who prefer familiar limitations. But they become historical museum pieces in a universe that has moved beyond their ability to comprehend. And if we accept? Vextai asked. Chen's smile became something that transcended mere human expression. Then the galaxy takes its next step. Your children will explore realities where consciousness can reshape matter with thought, where distance becomes a suggestion and death becomes optional, where the energy of a single star can be compressed into a pocket dimension and carried in someone's toolkit. The examples continued, each more impossible than the last. Civilizations that had learned to cultivate new universes like gardens. Species that communicated by sharing entire lifetimes of experience in moments. Technologies that could restore entire dead planets to life or create new forms of existence that had never been imagined. The choice, emphasized another architect, must be unanimous. The Great Integration requires all civilizations to participate, or it fails for everyone. This revelation sent new waves of panic through the assembly. Species that had spent centuries fighting each other now faced the realization that their survival depended on unprecedented cooperation. Dr. Keth Moore, his scientific curiosity overcoming his terror, managed to speak up from the observation deck. "How long do we have to decide?" "Time," Captain Torres said, with amusement that existed in several dimensions simultaneously, "is a resource we can manufacture as needed. You have as long as you require to reach consensus." But Chen's expression grew more serious. "However, the window for this opportunity is limited. The patterns that allow the Great Integration only align once every few million years. Miss this chance, and your galaxy will have to wait until all current civilizations have fallen and been replaced by their successors. The weight of that timeline, millions of years of stagnation versus immediate transcendence, settled over the assembly like a blanket of stars." Ambassador Ziltara, her analytical mind cutting through the cosmic scope to focus on practical concerns, asked, "What guarantees do we have? How do we know this isn't an elaborate deception?" In response, Chen gestured to the chamber around them. Without warning, the walls became transparent, revealing that the entire council station now existed simultaneously in 3 different realities. In one, they could see the familiar stars of normal space. In another, galaxies spiraled through dimensions of pure music. In the third, the very concepts of matter and energy danced as conscious entities. "This is your guarantee," Chen said as the walls returned to normal. "We've already begun the process. The council station now exists in spaces that should be impossible. Your life support systems are drawing power from sources that don't exist according to your physics. The translation matrix handling this conversation is processing languages that haven't been invented yet." The revelation that they had already been partially integrated sent species into frenzied consultation with their home governments. Emergency quantum communications flooded subspace as entire civilizations debated decisions that would affect the fundamental nature of existence. Hours passed, then days. The council chamber became a continuously operating forum as species presented arguments, shared fears, and struggled with concepts that challenged everything they had believed about reality. Some species embraced the opportunity immediately. The exploratory wanderers voted for integration within minutes of understanding the possibilities. The academic preservers saw it as the ultimate library of knowledge. The artistic melodians viewed it as access to new forms of beauty beyond imagination. Others resisted. The traditional stone-bearers feared losing their connection to solid matter. The militant ironclad worried about weapons that could function across dimensional barriers. The deeply religious spirit callers questioned whether transcendence without spiritual preparation could corrupt their souls. Through it all, the human delegation waited with infinite patience. They had learned, during their 18 months of exile, that forcing evolution was counterproductive. Growth had to be chosen, not imposed. "You're enjoying this," Admiral Park observed privately to Ambassador Chen during one of the deliberation breaks. Chen's smile reached its final form. Not the small expression he had worn during the exile trial, but something that encompassed joy, wisdom, and the deep satisfaction of a plan that had taken decades to unfold perfectly. "We were exiled for being too aggressive, too unpredictable, too willing to challenge the established order," he replied. "Now we're offering to guide that same establishment into possibilities they never dreamed of." "Yes, I'm enjoying the irony. Think they'll all say yes?" Chen watched the ongoing debates. Species that had been enemies for millennia, now working together to understand concepts that made their historical conflicts seem trivial. They will. Eventually, because the alternative is being left behind while the universe grows beyond their comprehension. The final vote came after 2 weeks of deliberation that had transformed galactic civilization more thoroughly than any war or plague in recorded history. Species that had spent centuries fearing change found themselves advocating for transformation that would have been unthinkable days earlier. When Counselor Vextai called for the final tally, his crystalline form had regained its clarity. He had spent sleepless days consulting with advisors, philosophers, and representatives from every corner of his species' territory. The decision they faced transcended politics or economics. It was about the fundamental direction of consciousness itself. The motion to accept the Great Integration, Vextai announced to a chamber that held representatives from over 400 species, passes by unanimous consent. The words triggered changes that rippled across the galaxy instantaneously. Reality became more flexible. Gravity learned to dance. And the speed of light discovered it had been moving far too slowly, for far too long. Every planet, every ship, every consciousness in the galaxy felt the shift as the universe revealed possibilities that had always existed but had been hidden behind veils of limited thinking. Ambassador Chen stood one final time before the assembly that had once exiled his species, but now they were all something more than they had been. Participants in a cosmic transformation that elevated matter and consciousness alike. "Welcome," he said, his smile now shared by every being in the chamber, "to what comes next." And throughout the galaxy, on worlds that now existed in pocket dimensions of engineered paradise, in ships that sailed between realities as easily as ancient vessels had crossed oceans, consciousness expanded to embrace possibilities that had no limits except those imagination was willing to accept. The galaxy had exiled Earth, hoping to remove a disruptive element from their ordered civilization. Instead, they had given humanity the freedom to discover what lay beyond order itself. And when humanity returned, they brought the universe's next chapter with them, wrapped in a smile that had always known this day would come.